Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 388th New Social Environment. I'm Nick Bennett, the Special Projects Editor here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Tomashi Jackson, Adriana Farmiga, and Leanne Norman. We are thrilled to have the poet Erin Lynch here today, who will read to close out our program. Just a few quick notes before we get started. The Rail team will be helping out with tech if you have any questions. Closed captions are available by pressing the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we started all of our Zoom events with two important acknowledgements. The first is that here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. The second is an acknowledgement that Black Lives Matter. The heart of both of these acknowledgements is a commitment to the liberation of the oppressed and solidarity for all who struggle for freedom, and recognition that when it comes to liberation, our histories never unfold in isolation, as spoken by the great Angela Davis. In that spirit, I encourage you all to check out the chat for a living document of resources and actions that we'll be posting in just a moment. But for now, I would like to introduce today's guest and host. Multidisciplinary artist Tomashi Jackson works across painting, textiles, sculpture, and video to place formal and material investigations in dialogue with recent histories of displacement and disenfranchisement of people of color, resulting in formalist compositions of exuberant color, bold geometries, and intricate layerings of material. Her exhibition, The Land Claim, is on view at the Parrish Art Museum in Watermill, New York through November 7th. And her exhibition, Brown 2, at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard, opens on September 20th, 2021. Our hosts today are artist and educator Adriana Farmiga, who was named Assistant Dean of the Cooper Union School of Art in 2017 and Associate Dean in 2018. She graduated from the School of Art at Cooper Union in 1996 and has taught there since 2011. Writer and strategist Leanne Norman has published her writings in Bomb, Studio, the Studio Museum of Harlem's magazine, and the Penn GSE Journal on Urban Education, and is a regular contributor to the Brooklyn Rail. Leanne studied art criticism and writing at the School of Visual Arts. And without further ado, Leanne, passing the mic over to you.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you to Adriana and Tomashi for being in conversation today. It's interesting because I think, Tomashi, your work has been interesting to me for a while because there are so many layers and there's so much research that goes into it. And I think just the way that you use art to kind of uncover hidden histories, social histories, things like that is really interesting to me. So I know that the Cooper Union Menschel Fellowship Program was really kind of important for you in a lot of your work. And I wonder if maybe you could just start us off by talking about your time there and how that sort of influenced or changed your work kind of going forward.
Hi, I'm Tomashi and really glad to be here. Thank you to everyone at the Rail for facilitating this space and for inviting me to participate. Hi, Adriana, who I love. I'm really excited to be hanging out this way. Yeah, so the Menschel Fellowship for Creative Inquiry is what we call it at Cooper Union, the Benjamin Menschel Fellowship for Creative Inquiry. I was really excited when I was awarded this fellowship. I think I applied in my second year. Yeah, I applied as a second year. And so this is 2005, 2006. So this is like 2007, 2008. And one of my friends who was a first year, who came into Cooper his first year at the same time that I did, Adam Rhodes, who's one of the founders of the essential and important New York party community, Poppy Juice. He took me to Belize with him. He took me and my best friend, Nia K. Evans, who was studying education policy at Columbia Teachers College at the time. He took us to Belize with him for Thanksgiving break. And we came back with all these questions. It turns out his grandparents Jean and Felicia Hernandez were touchstones as educators and labor organizers in this small seaside fishing and farming community, historically fishing and farming community called Dangriga. So we came back with all of these questions about waste management. I came back with a lot of questions about plastics and polyethylene plastic and polystyrene foam plates. And yeah, that I continued to have questions. I had questions about things that were objects that were described as disposable or one-time use, and the reality of their ever-presence. And I wondered about the relationship between these objects and collective memory and indigenous language and folkways that were disappearing. During the time that we were in Belize, UNESCO had just declared the Garifuna language and cultural traditions as endangered. So yeah, so I proposed that I proposed for the mental fellowship that I wanted to go back to Belize and ask more questions. And with Nia's help, we came up with a list of questions to survey, like a survey questions, interview questions. And we talked with people who still had their farming land. We talked with people who didn't have their farmland anymore. We talked about food, we talked about water, we talked about waste management and the imposition of westernized systems of waste management that were really impractical for us. You know, like bundling things up in plastic bags and then throwing them away as if they're not going to literally bake. It actually like doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So so you know, we looked at like how things were handled before landfills were introduced as a system for waste disposal. You know, the burning of organic waste, the telling of stories around fires at night around the burning of organic waste. So I could go on about all these projects, but it was important because it started to open my flower around my interest in empirical research. I didn't know what that word meant before I got to Cooper. And it's lucky that it's really good to have a best friend who's in another field because you know, her practices of observation and assessment and evaluation were really began to inform and shape the way that I tried to find ways to ethically ask questions and then use those questions, those answers, that process to produce the visual outcome that I did not expect. And then this work was also pivotal. Thank you for moving to this image. I was in a class with Leslie Hewitt. Leslie Hewitt was teaching this advanced drawing class, and it just shook the shingles off of everything. Onyeda Kachuk was in that class. Felipe Baeza was in that class. Annabelle Roberts McMichael, who's now a young urban farmer. Eric Nathaniel Mack, Samantha Vernon. Yeah, it was a heck of a class. And you know, we were just trying to figure stuff out. And at the time I had divorced my relationship. I divorced myself from any extra color. My color teacher's in here right now. Stephen Ellis was my foundation year color teacher. Literally, he had us looking at the G's Ben Quilters and our Cooper Union copy of Interaction of Color. And I felt like I just didn't know what to do with color. Color was so intoxicating. I had spent years painting murals in California with Juana Alicia, one of the women who painted the Women's Building, the Feminist Monument, and the Mission. So I'm like a color drunkard. And so when I got to Cooper in my second year, I refused to allow myself to use color so that I could better understand it. Spent a lot of time in the print shop on the 5th floor with Lorenzo Clayton and Scott Nobles. And yeah, I learned how to silkscreen print, and I learned that I could turn a photographic image into a half-tone line. And that it occurred to me that when a line cross-hatches, that it creates the illusion of space. That's the beginning of what we understand as drawing, whether it be an etching or on a cave or on a 2D surface. And Cara D'Eduardo, big deal in the print shop for me. And Day Gleason's experimental printmaking class. So anyways, I was trying to figure out if I could use printmaking to trace photography back to drawing. and to make cross-hatching happen so that I could make a drawing happen out of the collision of materials and not the imposition of a stroke on a surface. And yeah, it was in that class that I figured, they told me to stop here. I thought that this piece wasn't finished. Tail feather is what it was called. And in that crit, it was Leslie in the group that said, stop, we need to look at this. We need to think about this. And it really changed everything. That and a previous piece, the tree. If we could go back, and I'll stop talking, but we could go back a little bit. There's a piece called The Market System. Nick, yeah, there we go, there it is. Yeah, this one was a really big deal. This one, I mean, for me, it was a big deal. It's when I realized that I could create the illusion of depth using a line, halftone lines on a surface. And the question that I had then was, can a sculpture be a painting? Can a print be a painting? Can a print be a sculpture? What are the properties? What are the characteristics that make a painting a painting? It's bound to the wall. It's associated with the wall. Something was wet and then it dried. And it was also really important for me to collect these objects of the disaster of waste management from New York. So as not to suggest that this problem of waste management, mismanagement is an issue in Central America and not really an issue of like, you know, right here. So I collected polyethylene bags from everyone at school and used them to stuff this, this print and make it breathe off of the wall. So hey, Cora, this continued, these questions continued to grow.
That sounds like it was an incredible time for you to be there. You're asking all these really interesting questions. And I think what seems really important and kind of foundational is that you're, learning about different techniques and forms and you're experimenting with them. And that it's just really fascinating in this moment. And I think it'd be a great time actually to bring Adriana into the conversation. You studied at Cooper and you sort of like had this long-standing connection. Now you're on the part of the faculty and things like that. So I wonder, can you talk about the influence of Cooper Union for you and your work and how that relates to, your own teaching in students and things like that?
Yeah, sure thing. I sure can. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for including me in this conversation. I'm really excited to be in dialogue with you, Tomashi. I have endless love for you. So it's an honor and it's a privilege. And I vividly remember seeing the phrase "a generalist approach to an art education" in the catalog when I was applying to Cooper for my undergrad. And those interdisciplinary conditions of learning at Cooper were what allowed me to fully embrace and embody fluidity in ways that greatly influenced my work then and now, and where the poetry of materiality and making could interweave with broader issues about identity and place, just by showing me the possibility in the range of expression to make those nuanced connections between things, whether that was in sculpture or drawing or painting or installation. And although formally or on paper, I identify as a sculptor who works in the space of conceptual still life, it's so much more than that, which is why I had such a lovely moment with you, Tomashi, this past week when we both acknowledged basically at the same time in text message that interdisciplinary elasticity that we share from having gone through a Cooper education, where as artists who make work in very different ways, my cat's about to go behind me, so if you see him, I apologize, but whereas artists who make very different work, we literally ask ourselves the same questions. Can a photograph be a drawing? Can a print be a painting? Can a painting be a sculpture? And the answer is yes, right? There's a certain kind of biodiversity to all of this, which is why I think it's a little crazy or maybe wonderfully coincidental that you have this show up at the Parrish right now, which is situated on Shinnecock land, which in addition to the rich and complex or complicated history of its people, of its native people, has its own striking and unique natural biodiversity to it. I think there's something like I don't know, 9,000 acres of marine life environment just in Shinnecock Bay itself, which includes everything from open water, salt marshes, dredged islands, inlets, creeks, and so on. And it's the kind of biodiversity or interdisciplinarity, I'm going to make the connection, and geography that functions as its own site-specific work. In that, it serves as a regionally significant habitat for all of these fish and plants and fowl. And you know, as I mentioned, I think there's a connection between that kind of biodiversity and interdisciplinarity. And Tomashi, I would just love to hear your thoughts again on how interdisciplinarity or working in a multivalent space, maybe particularly as it relates to this exhibition, how you respond to that, or how that multivalent or interdisciplinary of that, how that multivalent way of working or interdisciplinary space of working factors into this body of work or the work that you have on view at the parish or in general.
Goodness, you just opened it all the way up. You were like, I'm gonna ask you something specific, and also, you know, we're generalists, so like how far out can this kite string stretch? Gosh, the land claim, boy. So much like what happened with fever grass, which I'm just realizing now because of this conversation we're having and because of the preparation that that you and Nick and I did for this conversation and looking back through old hard drives. I thought, you know, when I thought that this project's methodology came from the methodology that Martha, K. Anthony, Kayla, and I and Rachel developed with the Brown 2 project during the lockdown, which was to continue our conversations over Zoom and transcribe them and focus our attention on you know, producing a semi-contained publication that will allow the exhibition materials to reach beyond the space itself during a time when people could not gather safely. I thought that that's why it happened. And then while I was working, I realized that this was the same methodology that I used for my thesis to get out of MIT, talking to my mother over Skype, and then Nia transcribing for me, and then projects coming out of that. But now I actually realize that this goes all the way back to the Menschel, which is why we start there. It goes all the way back to this space, you know, the space that I had at the time I came to New York, like knowing very few people, you know, I had some friends who were here, but just like I'm from the Southwest, you know, I don't have any people here, blood relatives here. And so being at Cooper then allowed me the space to make friends with someone like Adam, and to just to the space to ask questions and to be encouraged to visualize them and to think seriously about them. You know, like it's a place where it's actually like thinking deeply it's really good. It's not something to be shunned for. So I say that because that's what happened with the land claim. I'm gonna ask Nick, I already sent you a text message about this, but the PDF of the Three Sisters we have a book coming out. My first museum book is coming out of this show, out of the land claim. And I'm asking him to do this because of we're getting into issues that I am not an expert around, but people that I spoke with are. And I'm hoping some of them might be here in the room, but if they're not here yet. So this is a sneak peek of the section of the book that I'm responsible for in the forthcoming publication for the land claim. So if we, next page. So I'm thinking about the Shinnecock people who participated in this project. That's Loretta, Princess Arrow. If we continue to scroll, we'll come to Tila Troge. And there's Tila Troge, Jeremy Dennis, and Kelly Dennis. So this project was really, it started with conversations with people on the East End of Long Island. I had been introduced to them by the Parrish Art Museum curator, Corinne Ernie. There's Tila, let's stop there. And if we can zoom in on her page on the left, we can just take it from her. So Tila says, she's an attorney for the Shinnecock Nation. So Tila says, when you're on the highest point of the Shinnecock Hills, and you look around, you can see the Atlantic Ocean. Uh-oh. So Tila, these drawings were made by Martha Schnee, who worked with me on the Brown 2 project at Harvard Radcliffe. So we had these conversations with people. Martha drew pictures and took notes. And so, you know, what you're talking about, Adriana, about elasticity, flexibility, for me, that also included working with other people and zeroing in on their, like, what they wanted to contribute, their talents. And so Martha ended up making this, and Martha's job ends up being creating this whole other archive from the conversations that is immediately visual and handwritten. So Tila said to us, when you're on the highest point of Shinnecock Hills and you look around, you can see the Atlantic Ocean. You can see the Shinnecock Bay. You can see the Peconic Bay. It's beautiful, and it was stolen from us. When you look at the newspapers and the commentary that people make, you gave it away fair and square in 1640, while the Shinnecock Hills was actually 1859. We're not talking about a first contact early land theft. This is really a relatively recent land theft. This is really a relatively recent land theft. What I have been trying to do is look at what else was going on in the 1850s, is the expansion of the railroad system throughout the United States. And that's exactly what happened here. You start to see it on early maps before the railroad ever came through. You see them drawing it over the Shinnecock Hills. There was this nationwide federal policy of removing during that period. That was their solution to the problem. You know, we have to run this railroad through these people's land. How are we going to do it? So I wanted to come to Tila because Tila does very specific work around the water, and she works to get the land back with the Peconic Land Trust, and also sea kelp farming. She has taught me a whole lot about the health of the bay and the stability of the people, the Shinnecock Nation that lives primarily on the Shinnecock Neck. Let's see. She said, in working to get this highest point restored, the Sugarloaf Hill, which they did successfully rematriate just a couple of months ago. The first response was that the only reason we would want our land back is to build a casino. For a while, I was really offended. I've spent the last 3 weeks being horrifically offended and just angry. How could they try to say that is only why we want this land? Yeah, so that's the book that's coming. So yeah, I wanted to come to Tila specifically because she's someone to follow on Instagram, Tila Landback Troge. Daughters of the Sunrise, Warriors of the Sunrise. Everything that you're talking about, Adriana, about the uniqueness of this land, of this water, and the intricate systems that have historically for thousands of years been stewarded by Shinnecock people, and you know, disrupted and endangered by what's happened since. Well, I mean, it's an ongoing story. That's all. It's an ongoing story. So the invitation to come there and make the work allowed me the opportunity to listen and to learn and to make a document out of these conversations so that it'll continue to live well beyond my time. And you know, to like, so a part of the joy of what's coming from this work now, understanding that the publication is an important container. There's a book, everybody in here probably knows this book, How to Make a Great Exhibition, or What Makes a Great Exhibition. I was obsessed with that book when I was in school. The publication You know, how does, oh, this is a good drawing to stop on. And Martha Schnee made these drawings again. So seaweed rights, how much is going on in our waterways. The Shinnecock people are the people of the bays and the rivers and the ocean. That's who they are. So their stewardship having been disrupted for so long, and this young generation of people that I got to meet who are, you know, it's just incredibly historic what's happening right now. That they're standing up as lawyers, as hunters, as farmers, as they're not quiet, and they are not without strategic focus. So yeah, they're leading. So the paintings gave me an opportunity to visualize that, and the project itself produces multiple archives to deal with these holes in our archival understanding, our historic understanding of space.
Yeah, this is great. I really, just really was intrigued by the sample that you shared with us too, around the publications and the conversations that you were having with people that sort of, unearth these histories and kind of tell alternate versions of what happened, those kinds of things. Can you talk a little bit about how you took all of this research and all of these conversations that you were having and what you were learning about the sort of hidden history of this area, and how did that sort of manifest into the work that you created? Because there's an installation there, there's a sound piece that also I think takes some of these conversations that you were having, and then the way that you constructed the canvases as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that connects together?
Jeez. Well, so we did all this work. I worked with a curatorial fellow named Lauren Ruiz and Martha to have these conversations. And then May 13 is when I was able to fully vaccinated travel to the Watermill Center for the Arts and Humanities that hosted me under another fellowship. What I really want to talk about is the spaces that make any of this even possible. That's actually what I'm really interested in, because I'm constantly thinking about what this means for our students, for the art. And when I say our students, I mean anyone who takes the risk to pursue making visual art because they love it so much that they don't have another choice. I feel like we're all responsible for each other in that way. The Inga Marin Otto Fellowship for Visual Arts at the Watermill Center hosted me and paid for my supplies, paid for the making of the awning structures that were handcrafted in Los Angeles by Ruben Palencia. Yeah, so I mean, it kind of, the magic started to, the magic was just, I mean, the magic was in the team that I got to work with, really. Because a lot of times we weren't sure. This was postponed for a year because of COVID. And so what was supposed to open, I don't know, in June of 2020 ended up being like a whole year of having these conversations on Zoom and then working to transcribe them. Then I got to Watermill in early May, and it took a couple of weeks to set up the studio. So at this point, I still don't know what they're going to look like. I don't even know which images are going to be in Collision yet. I'm still trying to figure that out. And the conversations and the transcription really, I don't know. There's stuff that I'm not going to be able to explain because it's just kind of like, you know what happens when you're working, things start to take care of themselves. If you're fit, I feel like a big part of this was being able to stay on my feet. Because the deadline in all reality was incredibly tight. The show opened on July 10. And yeah, so I got there, and the Inga Marin Otto Fellowship, Micah Bozeman made sure that I had everything that I needed. There was canvas when I got there. There were paints brought to me from Nova Color, paint makers in California. Some supplies were not there. Some things I went out and like searched the island for, like textiles. My gallerist at Tilton Gallery, Connie Tilton, had a friend who used to own a potato, I think she still owns a potato farm, but gave me these vintage potato bags, paper bags from a Long Island potato farm from years ago. So, I try to embed the surfaces with things that are indicative of the space. Wampum dust was brought to me as almost like a slip, like a gooey slip in a bucket from Kelly Dennis, and it had been handed to her from Shane Weeks, who was a wampum carver of the Shinnecock Nation. And then soil. Lauren brought me a bucket of soil from the Parrish Museum's grounds, and that used to be a potato field where Junie Wingfield's family picked potatoes, and we talk about that in the publication. So I mean, it's kind of this alchemy, I guess, of like, how am I making this surfaces, and out of what? The textiles came from a couple little shops in Sag Harbor, which was a free Black people's place of transition. This is kind of a Juneteenth type of area, kind of like a Galveston, Texas type of area. Like the enslaved people here were enslaved longer than other places in the Union because the knowledge of emancipation was withheld from them. This is the first and the oldest northern plantation existed on Shelter Island, a provisions plantation to serve the sugar plantations in Barbados. So yeah, I mean, all of this stuff was like cooking inside of me, and I'm trying to figure out like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And eventually I got into a good enough groove where each of the paintings, I mean, also the space was beautiful. This artist in residency house where I got to work. I thought that I was gonna make 6 paintings. I ended up making 7. I ended up making like 9 surfaces because the walls were just so big and beautiful. I came in and I felt compelled to make more. I felt I needed to use all of the space. So I tried to make as much as I could. And yeah, I mean, eventually they just told me what to do. Like they emerged, their individualism, their individuality emerged. And, after a while, I just kind of like knew what each of them were telling me to do. And if I went a little too far, I was punished. Like I was visually punished, I had to come back. There's one, the blue one, or it's very blue-green. It's called Among Protectors. That one taught me a lot about listening. This one taught me a lot about listening. Had so much fun making it, and I would have so much fun washing the surface with color. I'd be like, ooh, that feels good. That's right. And then, ooh, that's nice. Ooh, that's nice. And I knew that I wanted the base to be teal. I wanted to have a new experience with color with this body of work that wasn't so much like, bam, bam, but like I wanted to dial down. I wanted to experience more gradient action. And I would get so excited with this one that I overwhelmed it with phthalo blue green shade, and had to come back in over a number of days to just like tape it off and clean it up and peel things away. I don't know. Now I don't know. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. I just really loved making them. I really loved making them. And Shane Weeks, who's one of the people that I painted in, what's it called? It's Among Fruits, Big Shane and the Farmer. When he came in and saw the work all stretched up on the walls before they were wrapped around Ruben's awning structures, and he said that it reminded him of tanning hide. So like there's a lot of stuff that emerged around the making of this work that, I mean, I really didn't know. Other people would come in and be like, oh, this is particularly indicative of this space, and I had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm really struck as I was listening to you talk about the materials that you used, and just how that all sort of blended together really beautifully with the conversations. I think when people think about the Hamptons, they think about luxury and whiteness, and I really like how when you were interviewed by the New York Times when the show opened in the summer, and you said that your sort of guiding question at the beginning of all this was thinking about what's happening with communities of color there. And so it's really striking to me that you're taking all of the sort of original indigenous materials, these old potato sacks and the soil and just all those kinds of things. I think it just creates, as Adriana was saying before, like all of these layers, and it's so I am at a lack of words here because I'm just sort of, my mind is blown of the beautiful way that all of it has sort of kind of come together.
I do want to offer something. I do want to offer that this history is not hidden. I want to offer that we can recalibrate what we are centralizing when we're thinking about a place. It's funny because I had no time to do, I went to Sag Harbor for ice cream. That was a treat. But there was the presumption that the given association with this place is automatically excessive wealth and stuff is I came away feeling like that's just not a given, because my experience was framed by my engagements with people from the Eastville Historical Society, Georgette Greer-Key, Junie Wingfield, and him telling me about his family, Bonnie Cannon, who continues to fight for affordable housing, Minerva Perez, who's the director of OLA there, who helped to facilitate COVID-19 testing for the entire East End. Because, a lot of things ended up, a lot of these conversations ended up changing with COVID. It's an airborne virus, and this compulsion toward hyper class hierarchical segregation was really, violated by the airborne nature of this virus. So I don't know. It's just like I didn't experience any yacht parties. I was there working. I was there working. I was there as a working Black person. So the narratives that I learned about that were not just past, but very much present, about working people of color and Indigenous people continuing to work to get their land back and work to survive in a very nearly successful extermination for hundreds of years. That informs what I think of when I think of this part of the country. I learned from some of these conversations about the elders among the Shinnecock people who decided to stay. Almost everybody who was able to survive was driven into the Trail of Tears, into the Long Walk, into the reservations of the Southwest and Wyoming and Utah. These people stayed. They stayed. And it's just, they've never not been there. So I am of the people who do not only first think of second and third houses. It's not lost on me that so much shapes the economy and the lived experience there, but that's not the lens that I choose to prioritize. At least not anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not just history past, but it's present and ongoing. It's a great point. I wonder maybe if we can sort of shift just a little bit. I know we just have a kind of few minutes left before we shift into other things. So you're at Harvard, you're a visiting lecturer, and as Nick mentioned at the top of the hour, you have an exhibition opening on Monday. I wonder if you could share a little bit with us about what's happening at the Radcliffe Institute with your show.
That's true. That's true. Oh, we can stay with the pictures, Nick. We can stay with the pictures because Adriana might want to take us back into something. Or Nick might be taking us to this publication. That might be what he's doing. Let me stay out of Nick's business. Okay, so I love reading from this. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this by going back into the forward. So this is Brown 2 at Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University. It opens on Monday. We are going to have some opening party type stuff on Zoom. You can go to the Radcliffe's Instagram page or to their website to register. I'll be in conversation with Dean Tomiko Brown-Nagin on Monday afternoon, and also Meg Rotzel, curator Meg Rotzel, will be there for helping to facilitate question and answer. So so Brown 2 arose initially from my interest in Brown 1. So visualizing the history of the Brown versus the Board of Education litigation and legislation became a focus for me after I watched a coalition of attorneys, educators, and advocates come together in 2014 to save what remained of yellow school bus service for Boston Public Schools and their students. The newly elected mayor, Marty Walsh's first budget included the defunding of public education transportation just 2 months before the fall semester began. The coalition's efforts involved testifying at multiple public school transportation hearings held at Boston City Hall, which I documented with video and photography. Oh, I was gonna do the same thing, Nick, that's what I was gonna do. Yeah, that's a still from one of the videos that I made during that time. And again, this is just me following around my best friend who's an education researcher. So Brown 2, when I was invited to, oh yeah, so, geez, what can I tell you? So community members told stories about children having to travel long distances to get to and from well-resourced schools outside their own neighborhoods. The city had no plan for inclement weather, no current information about children's experiences of violence during journeys to and from school, and no data-driven justification for the move that would quietly end neighborhood busing for BPS middle school students, undoing the famous and notorious 1974 Garrity decision. I realized that I did not understand the landmark Brown versus the Board of Education school desegregation cases, because I didn't even know that there were more than one case, that there was more than one case. I didn't understand them. They took place in 1954 and 1955, nor did I understand one of their core outcomes that was being rolled back before my eyes all over the country, not just here, all over the country, school transportation. I was moved to begin properly learning about the Supreme Court cases that transformed all of public space I had experienced in my lifetime. The school transportation hearings revealed disturbing similarities between the present and the past, as they coincided with many ongoing national discourses around further disinvesting from public education, along with almost monthly occasions of extreme violence between armed police or vigilantes and Black and brown children and adults across the country, often resulting in the deaths of the victims while their killers and brutalizers were declared unaccountable. So I turned to the documentary photography of the NAACP Legal and Educational Defense Fund attorneys that they use to support their sociological arguments as source material to reflect upon my questions about the historical treatment of Black children in public space. I use painting, printmaking, video, and sculpture to place them in collision with images from the present day. So I was invited to have a solo show at the Radcliffe, and I thought, well, this will be a great time to go back into some archives. I'll have access to archives everywhere around here, you know? So I thought I was going to facilitate teach-ins. Here I am with my team. It was my first time having a research team of professional students who actually there's Martha, who actually wanted to do this stuff. And then we, you know, we were all changed by the situation. So yeah, so what we ended up doing was asking ourselves, what is our archival impulse? What is access without exhibition space? How can we share the teach-ins that I'd wanted to have and our findings when people cannot gather safely? So we focused for a year on making this publication. And then once I was able to be vaccinated and to be tested weekly, I was able to use an empty studio at the Radcliffe Institute to make 4 big works on paper that are now framed and look gorgeous. I just walked down the street to see them right before this, so I was late. Yeah, it's beautiful. So for anyone who can come up here, oh, and it's all color coordinated. I think our graphic designer's in the house. John Kramer designed these spreads. So the fun part about this was before we went into lockdown, Martha had us all join her at the Schlesinger Library on the History of Women in America, the only library of its kind in the world, where Polly Murray and Ruth Badson's papers are held. So we figured out a system for ourselves to include images from their archives in each spread. So these spreads then ended up informing the works on paper that I created. everything's color coordinated. So for anyone who can come up here to Cambridge, if you're gonna be around, then the show, it's actually like really beautiful. The show is actually really beautiful. It's my first time having big pieces that are framed. And you can get yourself a book. Or if you happen to be an educator or a museum worker and are interested in having this as a curricular referent, which is what we intended for it to be, like this is actually like years of study. This can instigate years of lesson planning and study. Yeah, Meredith Whitaker, the co-creator and director of the AI Now Institute that's housed at NYU. If any of you are interested in getting a hold of this book in many numbers to use it as a study referent, you can contact Meg Rotzel at the Radcliffe Institute. But yeah, come hang out.
I'm going to state the obvious, Tomashi, but we need at least a few copies for the Cooper Union Library, so I'm happy to help facilitate that. And I just, I keep going back to this like triumph of layers. This is all about layers, right? Layers of history, layers of color, layers of imagining and reimagining, and just repositioning ourselves in our relationship to these histories. So I just want to give a shout out to layers as we wrap up or move towards the Q&A, and I'll be in touch about the books for the library. But thank you for sharing that project. I'm very excited, and congratulations.
Yes, to echo all those things, congratulations. And thank you both for being in conversation today. I appreciate it. It was great.
I want, Tomashi, I don't want to cut you off. Sorry. Did you have anything else to share?
I was just gonna say thank you. I hate things ending, but and we're not even, we're actually doing, I think we're doing good on time. I was just gonna say that I'll do anything for my home, my alma mater library, number one. The librarians at the Cooper Union Library were the people who guided me and helped me around my attempts at researching Seneca Village for the project that becomes Time Out of Mind at Tilton Gallery in New York, and also my contribution to the 2019 Whitney Biennial. But yeah, I don't know. I think I was just gonna say I'm just thank you, and also like I'm just I feel like all of this is a natural outgrowth of my art education, of like art education being accessible to me. That this all feels like just, I'm just working. I'm working with what I learned, and I'm working with what I was able to, I don't know, like be encouraged around, because working artists and historians and humanities focused people and poets and writers and advocates, whether I was a dropout, which for 7 years I was a dropout. I deferred from SFAI for 7 years and followed working artists around the Bay. I don't know, like I just feel like I'm held in this like safety net of scholarship and the pursuit. And yeah, so I want that for anyone else who wants that,
Tomashi, thank you so much. Like you said, with that most recent the catalog that we just looked at for Brown too, I feel like this is a conversation that could go on probably for hours and hours and hours. I'm also sad that it is coming to an end. However, I want to thank you all for this electrifying conversation. We do have time just for a couple of questions, and I am going to get right into it. So first, I will pass the mic over to Noor. And Noor, I apologize if I mispronounced your name, but you should be able to turn on your mic now.
Yes, thank you so much. Hi, I am so inspired as always. And Tomashi, it's so good to see you. I'll very briefly say that I had the honor of being at the Wexner Center while Tomashi was completing the exhibit. And I'm still kind of processing what that experience really was. It was so moving on so many levels. being in close proximity to Tomashi, who was working literally 24/7, was and coming into the studio was like entering an altar in some way. There was a very like holy presence, or it felt like a sacred space. And I love, Adriana, how you mentioned layers, because every single minute I spent in close proximity to Tomashi as she was completing this, there were so many layers that were being uncovered. And the intentionality and the humility and the deep listening that you brought to this space was like one of the biggest honors of my life to be, and it changed me to forever. I think the Hamptons, what is today known as the Hamptons, Shinnecock lands, is, being in that space, I will just say, was very unsettling because of the very vast inequality that exists. That's also very visual. You see the most lavish houses you've ever seen in your life, and then and so yeah, the being in that space was very unsettling, and to be able to kind of follow the light that Tomashi was in the space, I just want to quickly acknowledge that I'm currently in conversation with Tila and Shane and recording them for the Future Ancestors podcast featuring the Shinnecock people. So you started a whole, chain reaction of so many important conversations, and I look forward to where it takes me. My question is, sorry, this is a really long question, is I know because you were working literally 24/7 and it was back to back, there was so much emotional labor involved. I witnessed it. I'm wondering now that if a month almost has passed since then, what lessons have emerged for you looking back, and also what are you celebrating?
Wow. Now I'm celebrating being back in a space with you. This person is a part of the magic that I was talking about, where like I didn't always know what I was supposed to do, and I was affirmed by people like Tila and people like Noor and people like Naima and and before them Delissa and Aaliyah and Calliope, who were working with the Rachel Dickstein Theater. I think this makes me want to continue to celebrate the importance of conservatory interrelatedness. Adriana and I come from a place where we are graduates of a school of art, fine visual art was our focus there. And we explore interdisciplinarity inside of or under that umbrella, but then there's also the larger umbrella of the arts and humanities that I feel like when we are able to be together in spaces that respect our work, we don't all have to be the same. It's not about tolerance. It's about like mutual respect for our crafts. And then, I feel like the conservatory, when I'm lost or when I'm in doubt, the conservatory like always swoops in with a cape to like quietly show me things, or, like people will pop up like, wow, well, thank you. And now I know what to do with what I have to do, so yeah, I'm celebrating that right now. And I'm celebrating, that it got completed, because, I was working until the last stroke on the last painting. And then you stayed up with Ruben while he stretched that last painting. And then we drove it in a truck the next day to the museum. Luckily, the hanging strategy that he created, the French cleats for the awning structures made them really easy to hang. So I feel like my gallerist Will from Night Gallery called me. He actually went out there and saw the show today, and he said it was absolutely perfect. And I agree. I like it when I can objectively say, not because I was personally involved, that we did a really good job. And I include you in that, Noor, because your energy really what we did, girl. So yeah, I'll celebrate that. And I guess, and a lesson that I'm learning, that I've learned during this time of resting, is that I do need rest, and I really need to reevaluate, what it means when I sacrifice my body for the work, because toward the end I was actually in a lot of physical pain, but I just begged my body to do what it needed to do for the paintings to get done. And then when they were done, I felt like a deflated balloon, like I was stumbling in the dark to get back to my dorm after that last painting was done. So yeah, I don't know what that means. You know, I'm not sure if that's something to like, for me to be trumpeting, like, yeah, my nerve was pinched, but I kept going. You know, I don't know. So that's something for me to think about. But yeah, thanks.
No, thank you so much for that answer. And I just wanted to reflect back, rest as resistance. Rest is resistance. And we are learning that collectively and the hard way sometimes, but that's such an important lesson to reflect back. I love you, Tomashi. You're a powerhouse.
Thank you, Nora, and thank you, Tomashi, for that answer. I know we have a bit of a tight schedule today, but I am going to pass the mic over to Fong now. And I also want to note, thank you everyone for sharing your other questions. I'm going to pass them along to Tomashi and the team after this. So, but over to you, Fong.
Thank you, Tomashi, Adriana, Leanne, my old buddy, Tomashi, and Adriana. Wow, great to see you. Yes, congratulations on the show. I can't wait to come see it next week. And just quick question. I know that we're going to feature you on the print issue next October issue, actually. So there'll be extended question and whatnot. But I want to ask you one quick thing, because of course, Joseph Albert, who's famous for being the first rector of Blackmount College. Right after the Bauhaus was closed, he was sent there. I think he was there from 33, from the very beginning, until when it was closed in 49, I think, that when he went to become the dean at Yale. That's where he wrote the book. Oh, yes. Oh, my God, you are obsessed. Tomashi. Yes, so you know the history, all right? Let me skip all the lengthy analysis of his life, but interaction of color. The idea was every perception of color is an illusion. We know that, and he put practice before theory and whatnot. But interesting, in the same sense, one of his students is Rauschenberg. And I remember talking to Zoe Zucker. Evidently, I was told that they didn't get along, Rauschenberg being a student of Albert. But it's interesting, when I was talking to Zoe Zucker, he made a very good point, Tomashi, in that Rauschenberg is born in Port Arthur, Texas. So he's the Southern boy person. Go back and forth a great deal, and he was absorbing, I'm sure, vernacular art, American folk art. A lot of people, self-taught artists like Thornton Dyer, Asbury Davis, or Lonnie Holly, where color is not used as an optical sense, but it's used as a matter of constructing. So I'm just asking how the relationship with Rauschenberg, even though there's a link directly to Albert, and secondly, Annie Albert. So there's also Annie, right? Annie was deeply involved in traditional craft and art, the infusion of the two. So that's my question. I have many more, but that's it for now. I know you gotta go.
This is so, I knew that this was going to happen. I want to make a proposal that we meet again in our own thing. I believe in seriality. I think one-offs leave us wanting. I think maybe that's from being in school, but it's like you get to come back to another class, even if it's once a month, to continue and further a conversation. And if we were all together in the city, that's what we would be doing. We would be going to have dinner. We would be meeting up for brunch, or, we'd be meeting up at Byron Kim's house to continue these conversations. And it's natural, and it's a natural thing. But yes to everything that you said. I was told when I went back to school after 2 years of not painting, I was knitting. I started knitting. I stopped painting and I started knitting while I was working as a caregiver here in Cambridge after I graduated from MIT. No one understood what the heck I was trying to do. I wrote this thesis and I would carry it around in my purse to parties and bars and ask people to read it. People were like, are you crazy? So like, so I started looking after children and I learned how to knit because I wanted to keep my neck and my head warm while I was in the snow waiting for these children at their bus stops. And I would wrap my head and wrap my neck, but I could never stay fully warm. And we were still having very intense winters here. And as soon as I started knitting, I immediately started getting hungry for a color interaction. Because at that point I was like, maybe I'll never paint again. Maybe that's not what I'm supposed to do. Like I have to give it all up at some point. Like maybe I'm driving and maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to do. I was trying to slip into architecture. I was trying to slip into building technology at MIT to turn these sculptures, the sculptures that I had started making at Cooper Union, like that caterpillar, what I called the caterpillar for being, I wanted to turn those into building materials. I wanted to make a system to gobble up unused second life plastic and pull it out of our water supply and our food supply. And I was this close to getting into that program, and then I didn't. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So I started looking after children, I started knitting, and immediately I started asking myself, are these fiberworks paintings?
Yes.
Is this a painting? Unbeknownst to me, how do I know? And then after a couple of years, I quietly applied to Yale without telling very many people, because I was like, well, if I'm gonna ask if this is a paint, I wanna be where people are having like rigorous conversations about painting. And that would allow me to stay in New England. And yeah, so, yes to all of that. I mean, I returning to interaction of color, which I first studied with Stephen Ellis, who I'm looking at right next to you.
He's here.
He's here. My color teacher's here. I did not do well in that class. I was like, I did not do well, but I was still trying to understand color. And so when I re-entered interaction of color, it felt like a struggle to me. But when I re-entered interaction of color, I was reading courtroom transcripts of Brown versus the Board of Education. And that's when I started to see a linguistic overlap, a simultaneous use of terms from Albers and Thurgood Marshall. I love it when people are down to talk about the intricacies of Joseph and Ani's move from the Bauhaus to Black Mountain to New Haven and now to Bethany, where the Albers Foundation exists, because they were running from fascism. I think it's really important to remember that they were Jewish people on the run from Nazism, which we learned a lot about at Cooper Union. We focused a lot on Nazism in our first year humanities courses. So I feel like it's really important for me, like the social implications of an artistic pursuit is never lost. It's never happening in a vacuum. I would get into arguments with people about that the first couple of years at Cooper about like, nothingness. And that, that the work is about nothing, or Barnett Newman, the zip paintings are just about nothing, but he ran for the mayor, he ran for mayor of the city of New York. He wrote papers about our responsibility to public space as artists,
on the ticket of outdoor cafe and art education.
That's right. That's right. So we're all up in it, and it doesn't require a focus on the figure for us to be responsible for, like, we are beneficiaries.
Yeah.
So how can we as beneficiaries discount the social complexity of what the people who came before us endured to make the work that survives and we historicize today? We can't.
Yes, and the reason I'm asking whether Stephen would, maybe enter the conversation, you never go to your poetry reading. Hello, is simply this. I feel there's a beautifully orchestrated in terms of the layer of color, the fragment on the surface. There's an emotional present to it, but it's also very subtle. So that it negates easy reading to the political and social references, and that's the part that I feel more equally interested in looking at them. So what do you think, Stephen?
About the relationship of Tomashi's work and Rauschenberg Albers, you mean?
If you like to go that route, I'm sure we'd be interested in hearing you.
Well, I strongly agree that, mainly with the connection between all those the formal elements in the work, and that, those things are always meaningful historically. and in terms of, contemporary social life, as well as on a strictly formal basis. I just want to, jump on that bandwagon. I completely agree with that. Otherwise, the whole thing is just kind of a meaningless, exercise in gamesmanship of some kind.
Got it. Okay, cool. Adriana, any last word? And where is Leanne left already? Has Leanne left? Okay, that's fine. Okay. I mean, we can continue, but I appreciate you came on, and can't wait to see this show and see you in person, Tomashi, in flash.
I'm coming to New York. So right after this, I'm going to get off of this call and go to a talk, a multiple artists talking around Off the Record, from that's on view at the Guggenheim, that comes down soon, curated by Ashley James. And next week, I'm not sure how public this is, but I'm coming to the city next week for an intimate walkthrough of Off the Record with Ashley, the 22nd, the evening of the 22nd. So
well, if Adriana come and everybody can get together. Okay,
I would like that. I would like that. Love you, Cora. Did anyone else have any questions? I mean, we've already broken our 2 o'clock rule. Adriana,
yes.
Did you or anyone else have anything else to say? All hearts and minds are clear?
Yeah, just that I love you.
Lynn Crawford had a question.
Yeah.
Come on, Lynn, unmute, get wild.
Lynn, you should be able to turn your mic on now.
I'm flying high. I think I forgot my question. I'm so, everything you say took me to a different question. And I wanted to stop and stop and stop. So I don't know. I feel like
Lynn,
my
your question was about layers. It was about building layers.
I was curious. Sometimes, I think of things the way, if you understand how it's made, you understand how to dismantle it. And so when you were talking about layering and how you were looking at the land out east and all the history of it, if looking at that also informs the dismantling of it, or just for you to talk about that. I'm blabbering because I'm excited, but do you get what I'm trying to?
Mm-hmm. What you're saying, actually, my gallery director at Tilton Gallery is in the room, and she tells me sometimes, like, that I'm a serious colorist, but it perturbs her that so often all of the talk ends up being about research, or all of like the observation about the work ends up being about research. And I'm realizing that that's my fault, because it's happening again. What you just said, if you understand how it's made, you understand how to dismantle it. Mm-hmm. That's the way I feel about what we're living through. There's a really good book that we all should read called White Flight, Atlanta and the Making of Modern Conservatism, written by a historian who teaches at Princeton, who I'm low-key obsessed with, Kevin M. Cruz. The makings of modern conservatism, really, really important. I found myself driven to look at legislative history, which in Brown 2, Matt Kreger takes us from, he takes us before Brown, Murray versus Pearson. He takes us into Plessy, Sweat versus Paint. Actually, no, everything starts with Plessy versus Ferguson. That is, this Supreme Court decision upheld racial segregation through the separate but equal doctrine, ruling that Louisiana's segregated railway carriages did not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment because separate but equal facilities were available to Black travelers. I continue to feel compelled to better understand these like pivotal public space changing landmark events, legislative events, and litigation events, because I need to understand what's being dismantled all around us. Mm-hmm. Like as a Schoolhouse Rock kid, as a Sesame Street kid, as a child of the 80s and 90s, I low-key thought that things would be better, And so like, I find myself needing to understand how something is made, to understand the very targeted dismantling that we're living through now.
Yeah.
If anything's to be done about anything. And then of course I cast my lot with my life preserver, my buoy, which is always art education. That's never failed me. You know, even with the complexity of people and whatever, you know, like from elementary school, public magnet school in Los Angeles to, you know, and on. I trace my understanding of space to the opportunity to be in community like this, physically or otherwise, with artists, humanitarians, you know, what am I saying? Humanists, people who study the, you know, across disciplines. That's my basis for like holding on. And then from there, I get to try to understand other things.
Which
But,
is it's a very difficult in these days, and I admire both of you for doing it. Adriana, as you are, Tomashi, because artists, when they become successful, tend to also be more obsessed with their own career. You know, they really let go teaching, because I know how it is to teach adjuncts in order to pay barely any rent, or forget about studio, you know, and all the cost of living. But the fact that you both committed in a very serious way, that's, to me, there's hope to the art education that becoming too much like a sport industry, you know? So there's hope that there are artists like you guys who practice teaching as part of the art making, as the way that the rail is functioning as well. It's not your normal conventional publication whatsoever. It has no mission statement, except it reflects the artist's difficult journeys. And that is negative capability from top down. And yeah, grazie mille, you guys.
Thank you, Fong. And thank you so much, Tomashi and Adriana and Leanne, who had to move on to her next appointment.
Can we take a picture before we go? Can anyone who's able, Martha's printmaking in the Carpenter Center, the only Le Corbusier building in North America, with a print shop inside of it. Okay. Anyone who's able to turn your camera on, I'm going to take a picture now. 1, 2, 3.
Peace.
All right, got it.
Excellent. Well, did we?
Oh, look,
did we
more
get
people
everyone?
are turning their cameras on. Okay, wait, again, we have to do it again now. More people are coming.
Okay, I've
Okay,
got Martha.
cool. All right, y'all, this is really it this time.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Tomashi. Thank you for documenting this as it's happening. I do want to respect, thank you for staying a bit over your time, but I do know that you have other conversations to get to. But our conversations here wouldn't be the same if we didn't end with a poetry reading. So I am very thrilled to welcome our poet laureate of the day, Erin Lynch, to the stage. Poet and artist Erin Lynch has published her writing in New England Review, Gulf Coast, Diagram, among many other publications, and is the recipient of fellowships from the Hugo House and the Bill and Ruth True Foundation. Born and raised in Oregon, she is a descendant of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and currently she is a PhD student in creative writing and literature at the University of Southern California. So without further ado, Erin, over to you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much. That was such an incredible conversation. I feel very lucky to, meet and hear from so many artists that I hadn't known about before. And there were so many, threads opening up for me in that conversation. I'm really excited because I think that my work also overlaps in so many ways, with the layers that we're speaking about in terms of the archive fever, the excavation of histories and kind of narratives that are there but are not, need to be pulled out, those threads. So I'm going to read 2 poems from my, or maybe 3 if they go quickly, from my manuscript that focus on excavating particularly familial archives of the Dakota expulsion in the 1800s and how that affected my family. So I'll read. The first one is called The Project. From the claim I lay to those no longer with me, from the desktop folder to which I drag another .jpeg, another .mov, from words kept beneath the tongue, from boiled eggs, dry chicken, unsalted greens, from remains when the meal is gone. From the day I learned an uncle had spoken Dakota, from telling my mother and she replied, I never knew. From waking into sudden ringing silence on my 30th birthday in another new home, in another new state, from punctuation to punctuation, from dandelions joined together into a circle when I was younger, from this uncle who died with no one to speak to, from his grandmother buried in Standing Rock, from the JPEG of her headstone carved with her name, Elizabeth, and below it the years of her life, from the hollow I felt night after night, stomach walls collapsing, from the longing within my body surging toward a love over whom I no longer held claim, from stamen to root, from the prairies of the homeland where Elizabeth lived when she was younger, from those who claimed that land for statehood, from the eaves of my new home where a pair of pigeons perched encroaching, from photos of the two of us I couldn't bring myself to delete, in which I saw myself smiling, from lo, even the briefest joining of earthly things, from dandelion seeds scattered across the continent by its settlers to make it look more like home, from the English language and its shifting definitions and its rules of law, from 1862, from hungry men will help themselves, said a Dakota chief declaring war, from that war, at the end of which the survivors were exiled, including Elizabeth, from the smell after uprooting a dandelion and the stains, from all my mother never knew, from how could she have known when no longer knowing is the state's ongoing project, from the baby who, according to tribal histories, was snatched from its mother and dashed to the ground, from official histories that claim there were few deaths along the march. From these few, each with a name their family knew. From the dash, which elides. From the edible dandelion, a slightly bitter green with waxy milk running through. From the long, longer, from stems uprising between us, to this I come. And this next poem is called Livestream. I'm back looking at the photo of your grave while on another screen live streaming a rare moonflower closed in a Cambridge greenhouse, single tapering bud about to bloom, at which point science will pollinate delicately with a damp paintbrush, then the scent turns rancid and it dies. All this in 12 hours I can watch from my bedroom where blood has dried on my sheets in the mirror-like shape of a heart. I hate that I think like this, searching for the beauty inside any small accident, watching the stain fade to the ghost of a stain I have not washed out, while my third and smallest screen has been bright with messages from a watering app. Take action, take action, take action. I try to keep plants alive in my home and do succeed so long as I remember to look at them often with a clear, steady gaze, like a lens refocusing on what matters in the shot. For me and 179 other yearning viewers, the moonflower has not moved perceptibly, nor have I from this photo of your grave, which I have never seen in person, neither the grave nor its photo, time-stamped 7/14/2004, in the corner behind the marble pillar with its sunken inscription and carved cross, set among a suggestion of clouds in the background. A pink blur sits by someone else's grave. It must be roses. I zoom in until they fill the screen, heads and necks, shades of pink secreting their scents amid the long grass, trampled by whoever in the flesh picked the roses arranged them, left them to be preserved by chance at their most open. And I'll just read one more short poem and then we'll be done. And I'm so, grateful to be here, and I've really enjoyed this conversation and this day. This last one is called Harm. After the pine beetles came through that summer, the landscape was never the same again, and no one's fault. The end. There is, however, no comparable adaptation for people. Some nights, a man pounded at my door, yelling for baby. Nobody was baby. I didn't know him. Tried on grief, but managed only self-pity. Tried on rage, but managed only contempt. In my text messages, poem keeps auto-correcting to porn. Life becomes, without exception, something to be lived inside. Like the handguns in the sheriff's cabin, hung from bare nails, just out of my reach. Forgetting to thank friends, but never strangers. The smell of overcooked eggs turning my stomach. One cockroach dead on the kitchen floor, an antenna rotating in air. Against the symbolic. My friends ordered wedding rings, and through a translation error, both came engraved with the word no. Why would you strike a child the way you wouldn't strike a dog? My questions are at best meaningless, at worst answerable. And I notice too often the hairs around the base of the toilet. I have this computer I touch more than anyone. Still, someone's crushed bones fertilize the flower beds. Someone with 4 legs born into a language I don't know. Today I speak with a buzzing behind my eyelids, but the buzzing is not painful. Today I speak in gratitude for the crevice between the desk and the wall, curved bowl of the ceiling lamp full of flies, the reflection of the door frame in the window at 11:23 a.m. How can I function differently? I want to breathe so slowly, so softly, that the wrinkles in my shirt don't have to move at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. Virtual claps and snaps, and thank you so much for sharing your poems with us today. That was beautiful. We've gone well over our time limit, but I'm inspired by you, Tomashi, to break all the rules today. So thank you. Thank you so much, Tomashi. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. We'll put the links in the chat again, but please go and see Tomashi's shows at the Parrish Art Museum and the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard University. And we're here. Yes.
Can I add a request?
Please
go and see the show. Please support the Brooklyn Rail. Please support ongoing public programming at the Cooper Union. The entire Cooper Union, whatever is happening there virtually, and also returning to the Great Hall, to the Rhodes Auditorium for interdisciplinary seminar that are always open to the public. Please support art education for all of us.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Tomashi. And thank you for the work that you're doing that's part of that. So we're here every day at 1 p.m. Join us on Monday if you are able to join for a conversation with artist Eric Lindman and the Rail's own Louis Block and Tom McGlynn. We will conclude with a poetry reading by the Rail's own Elizabeth Lothian. And you can all now turn on your microphones to say hello and goodbye. And have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful poem.
Perfect way to end our
Thank you all.
It was so nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Erin.
We'll connect you all because you have to be best friends now. You see, Erin's the people's poet.
That's right. That's what they say. That's what we say. That's
what we say. It's these people's poet.
The poet of the people.
Of these people.
These peoples.
Tomashi, you're a force of nature.
Yes.
Agreed.
We love you, Tomashi.
Love y'all too. I'll see you next time.